Hey guys, I'm continuing the Batman videos for 2023 with my friend Eric.
How's it going, guys? How you
been,
doing?
Yeah, it's been a while since you've been in one of my videos.
Yeah, I think it was, when was the last time? I think, the Godzilla review? King of Monsters, I think?
The original Godzilla review.
Or was it the one that I ranted about Halloween?
No, that was before. That was before the Godzilla review. Yeah, I think my Godzilla video was the last one you were in.
Holy sheesh.
That was back in 2020.
What?
Yeah.
No way. Mm-hmm. Has it been that long? 2 years?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Almost 3 years at this point. Oh, and by the way, if you hear my dogs barking, I can't really help that.
But they're adorable.
No, they're not. No, they're not. I didn't ask for them. They're my family's dogs. I have a heart of ice. I'm sorry.
Anyway, Batman.
We're talking about a show that is very near to both me and Eric's hearts. Yeah. And that's Batman the Animated Series, created by Bruce Timm and Eric, how's that producer's last name said? It's Ranowski or something to that effect, right?
Eric Randomowski.
It's probably not said as Randomowski. We'll have his name come up as text on the video.
We're sorry that we botched your name, but we love your show. So if there's any consolation, I hope there it is.
Yeah. Now, the show, of course, is based on the DC Comics character created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. It was coming off the heels of the Tim Burton Batman film, the '89 one, and I don't know if Batman Returns came out before or after this, because both came out in 1992, but I don't know which came first.
I'm pretty sure... Because... I'm pretty sure Returns came first. It had to have. Because the animated series, to my understanding, was like... They wanted to go... Because I think Tim Burton even had like a little bit of association with the animated series a little bit.
Well, I know they used a little bit of Danny Elfman's score from the '89 Batman in some of the music for this, but also they created their own original score too.
Yeah, Returns came first in June, and then the animated series came out in September.
So in this video, we're going to be discussing our top 10 favorite episodes of the show. I'm going to do my list first, and then Eric's going to do his list, and...
Came prepared.
Yes, but before we get on to that, what are your opinions of Batman the Animated Series?
It is, I would say still to this day, it's probably the definitive interpretation of the Batman material. It is one of my all-time favorite shows ever created, ever. There's just, it's lightning in a bottle for Batman, where just like everything came together perfectly somehow. It's just like the animation, like the stylized animation of it, like the noir harsh shadows and all that, while also doing it in a cartoon form, is just amazing. The art style is amazing. The cast is iconic, obviously. The creators putting it all together. The music, it's just, like I said, it's just, I feel like the perfect interpretation of Batman. It's the perfect, like, DC extended, or I guess it's the perfect foundational, builder of a DC extended universe.
Yeah, because
we
basically
have these comparisons now.
Yeah, because the show was a huge success when it came out, and it spawned multiple spin-offs or shows that are within the same universe, like
continuity.
Yeah, so you had like Superman the Animated Series that came after this, Batman Beyond,
Justice League Unlimited, Static Shock.
Some people say Teen Titans is in this universe, but I heard things that contradict that.
In my head canon it is, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's, as much as I want it to be, it's not, unfortunately. I wish it was. Teen Titans is that good that it deserves to be in that conversation.
I know Bruce Timm had a hand in Teen Titans.
He did.
It's just not part of this particular continuity.
Yeah. I like I said, I tried really hard to make my head canon like this is somehow Tim Drake post season 4 of Batman the Animated Series, but it's just not.
Yeah.
But again, I'm gonna live with that with my headcanon and try to make it work, and hopefully one day it will work, but for now, it's not.
This show created the character of Harley Quinn, who was
Yeah.
later incorporated into the
Paul
comics and graphic novels.
Yep, Paul Dini created her as like a, to my understanding, like a side gimmick character for the Joker, and then her popularity just skyrocketed, and now she became so popular that they basically made her as part of the comics now and everything.
Yeah, she's like an important part of Batman lore.
Mythos now, yeah.
Yeah, and then there were multiple like Batman movies set within this universe, like Batman: Mask of the Phantasm,
Sub-Zero,
Batman Beyond, Return of the Joker, and Mystery of the Batwoman. And then a few years ago, you had Batman Harley Quinn, which at least was done in the animation style. I don't know if it's exactly in this continuity, but it was done in the same style. We probably should address the elephant in the room about this series, that Kevin Conroy recently passed away a few months ago.
Yeah, 2022 was not kind. Took away the Green Ranger and our Batman in the span of like a week and a half. Grim Reaper, why are you working overtime? But yeah, no, like... that that obviously I actually, and I still can't get over it, because I actually met Kevin Conroy at Comic-Con during the release of Arkham City, and that was like a dream come true because I got to meet my Batman, you know, and I always looked up to him and Mark Hamill and the whole thing, you know. That yeah. Do you have anything to say?
No, it's just really sad, and it was kind of a shock when I saw that he died. I was actually at a convention the day he died, too. Like, I was waiting in line and looking up, like, news and shit, and I was like, oh, shit, Kevin Conroy's dead. Like, at first, I was like, please tell me this is, like, an internet prank or something.
Yeah, I think it was cancer. I remember, like, looking up some of the... someone posted, like, his, like, last, like, cameo video, and it looked like he was going through treatment and all that, so there was something. But he still seems strong, though, and all that. Even, like, I don't know, like, how exhausted he was from treatment or anything, but he seemed fine-ish, but you could tell, like, something was going on.
Yeah.
But, man, there's just so many memories, not only, like, with the animated series, but for me, it was, like, the video games. There's also this great little short skit with Conroy and Tim Daly, who also played Superman in the animated series. And they have like this little... they're basically playing their characters, but in real life. It was a fun little skit. There's just... And also the story that Conroy tells about 9/11 when he basically became a cook. He was helping a lot of the responders during the whole digging everybody out. Like, Conroy was just as much as Batman in real life than he was in the show, and I feel like he's just one of those guys that was real.
Yeah.
And I saw a post today, and I really kind of agree that some people were like, "Where's Conroy in the acknowledgement in the Oscars?" And I feel like, I feel like sometimes if you play a character, or you impact the culture as much as like Bruce Wayne, Kevin Conroy's Batman has, because a lot of people look at him as like the Batman.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, even if it's a cartoon.
Yeah.
And I feel like the impact that he had, not only as his character, but even in real life, I feel like he should be celebrated and really remembered.
Yeah.
You know?
So I'm gonna start on my list, and for the sake of my list, I can't speak for his list. I'm not gonna be including episodes of the new Batman Adventures. I kind of count that as more of its own series, or at least like a sequel series.
Because you're wrong, but you know.
That's gonna get its own list, probably next year when I do these Batman reviews.
Fair enough.
So for my list, it's just going to include episodes from... I guess you could say the first three seasons of Batman the Animated Series. So we're going to start off with my number 10, which is Heart of Ice, which is the episode that really reinvented the character of Mr. Freeze. Now, Mr. Freeze was a character in the comics prior to this, but in the older Batman comics, he was more of a two-dimensional bad guy. This episode, and the animated series in general, really made Mr. Freeze a very three-dimensional and almost Shakespearean villain. This made him, like, such a tragic and sad character, and it was so well done that the comics later reinvented Mr. Freeze to fit the origin of him in this episode.
Yeah.
But what do you think of this episode?
I really like Heart of Ice. Here's the thing I just want to say about just the list in general, is that we're not saying that the other episodes are crap and these are the only good ones. Turns out, like, pretty much, like, almost every single episode, you're going to get some great enjoyment out of it, no matter what episode you put on. So I just want to say that. But Heart of Ice specifically, I pretty much agree with with everything that you said. The reinvention of Mr. Freeze, where they gave him, like, this tragic backstory, where he was, to be fair, taking advantage of his resources at work to try to save his wife.
Yeah, but his boss was a piece of shit.
He was a piece of shit. Absolutely, 100%. But, yeah, he basically took away his funding. Not really explained why he took away his funding, but,
it's a commentary on corporate greed.
Yeah. His goals were noble enough, and it's a good guy tragically turned villain, ultimately. And I think Mr. Freeze works best as that, where he's kind of like a sort of anti-hero, kind of playing up both sides. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like, it's amazing, the fact that the comics were just like, yeah, you did it better than us originally. We're just gonna adapt that. Good job, guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a good episode though. It's one of the go-tos and one of the main staples when you're talking about this show. So
yeah,
can't complain.
Number 9 on my list is See No Evil, which is basically about this ex-con who steals this suit that makes him invisible, and he's desperate to reconnect with his daughter, and so he steals jewelry to, like, give to his daughter, pretending to be some kind of, like, imaginary friend who's visiting her. And this is a surprisingly, like, yes, it has kind of an over-the-top sci-fi premise, but the actual story's surprisingly mature for a kid's show.
It reminds me of the whole storyline with Sandman in Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
A lot of connections with that, but yeah. And that's one of the things I love about this show overall, is that they really do a good job of, like, putting, like, even, like, side characters or new characters and putting them in the limelight and actually, like, justifying their existence.
Yeah.
And actually telling it. It's pretty much the Sandman storyline, but done a lot better, because what's cool about it is that the story basically tells the story of the perspective of a villain.
Yeah. He's a bad guy in the episode, but you do feel some sympathy for him. Again, it's a really adult story for, again, a show that was generally intended for kids, and that's what's so great about this show, is, like, it had so many mature themes. Obviously, this episode is inspired by H.G. Wells' The Invisible Man and the Universal adaptation, but I'm wondering if, like, the recent remake of The Invisible Man that came out a few years ago might have taken some inspiration from this episode.
I'd be curious. I haven't seen it, so I couldn't tell you.
It has some similar ideas, like an abusive ex-husband putting on an invisibility suit, and there's some similarities,
By the way, and I literally didn't realize this until I was editing the video and I was doing a little more research on the episode, it turns out actress Elizabeth Moss, who was in the remake of The Invisible Man, actually plays the voice of Kimmy, the daughter of the main villain in this episode.
Number 8 on my list is Shadow of the Bat, which is the first episode to introduce this series' version of Barbara Gordon / Batgirl. Barbara Gordon was introduced before this episode, but this is the episode where she becomes Batgirl. I have a lot of nostalgia for this episode because my grandparents actually had this on VHS, and they obviously bought it from me, but it was at their house, so I'm saying it's their VHS, but, like, I used to watch this all the time when I was over their house. Basically, in the episode, Jim Gordon is framed, and so Barbara Gordon has to prove her father's innocence, so inspired by Batman, she takes on a similar role, the role of Batgirl, and a lot of the episode is about her trying to prove her father's innocence, and having to prove herself to Robin and Batman. And it's also a really good Two-Face episode as well. Two-Face is my favorite Batman villain, so any episode with Two-Face is a plus for me. But what do you think of this episode?
I love this episode. It's actually on my list, but I'm not going to reveal too much just yet. But it's one of my favorite episodes. I'll go into more detail during my list. But I hear you with all that. I agree 100%. One of my favorite episodes. You'll find out when.
So, number 7 on my list is I Am the Night. Basically, in this episode, Jim Gordon is shot, and basically, a lot of the episode is really about Batman's relationship with Jim Gordon, and how Jim Gordon has become kind of a surrogate father to Batman in some ways. Like, Batman even mentions at one point in the episode that Jim Gordon is as old as his father would have been had his father not been killed. And I just think it's a really powerful episode. What do you think of this one?
I actually considered this episode in my running when I was making my list. I did rewatch it, and overall, I liked it. I just thought it was a little too... My only criticism towards it was that Batman was kind of monologuing his feelings out a lot. And I feel like one of the strengths with the show in general is its visual composition and all that, and their show don't tell type of storytelling. I don't know why, but this episode seemed to be like Batman kind of talking to a psychologist to the audience in a sense of just like, this is how I'm feeling right now.
There's definitely a bit of meta humor, like in that one scene where he's like, "I've become a cliche."
Yeah,
well, they sell T-shirts of me, like
like stuff like that. I was like, not working with the tone of your episode here, my friend. Personally, but the overall end result of the episode, though, when like Alfred and Robin kind of talking him out of it, it's pretty much like Batman having like a Batman crisis, because he's basically questioning himself of like, am I really doing any good by doing this and the whole thing. And when Gordon gets shot, that's kind of takes it for the worst, because now it went from, am I doing good? Am I doing any good for the city? Now the people closest to me are getting affected by this, and it's my fault ultimately. Even though it really wasn't Batman's fault, how it plays out. I just kind of feel like some episodes that kind of do this like worst case scenario situation, or like Batman questioning himself. I feel like there's episodes in the later seasons that does this material a little bit better, which is why I left it off my list. But I still think it's a decent episode. I just think they did the material better in later episodes.
So, number 6 on my list is A Bullet for Bullock. And basically, in this episode, it appears that somebody is trying to kill Harvey Bullock, who is a detective with the Gotham PD. Yeah. And Bullock has always been an interesting character to me, because even though he's like one of the quote-unquote good guys, he can be considered kind of an antagonist to Batman at points. But yeah, Bullock's a great character, and this episode does a great job at developing Bullock as a character. Mm-hmm. And it's also, like, the ending when you find out who's actually behind it. I don't want to give it away, but it's, like, pretty freaking hilarious, actually.
Yeah.
But what do you think of this episode?
I'm trying to remember, like, I actually don't remember this one all that much. I just know I love Harvey Bullock as a character. And I love something... Again, going back to what I said, where, like, the show really... When it focuses on some of the side characters, too, it really props them up and really puts them in the limelight, and you're never disappointed.
Now, I do want to point out that this episode is actually based on one of the comics. It's based on a comic book story from the early 90s of the same name by Chuck Dixon.
So, number 5 on my list is Beware the Grey Ghost, which is a great tribute to, honestly, what came before in Batman lore and the things that inspired Batman, because the early Batman comics from Bob Kane and Bill Finger were inspired by, like, the old serials, like The Shadow and stuff like that.
Yep.
And then, of course, in this episode, you have Adam West as one of the voice actors. Adam West, of course, played Batman in the 60s TV series.
Another Batman, rest in peace, along with Conroy, lived the solving crimes in heaven together again.
Yeah, but basically in the episode, there's a series of bombings, and Batman notices that these bombings are very similar to crimes committed by the villain of an episode of a show he watched as a child called The Grey Ghost, and basically the episode is about Batman contacting the actor who played the Grey Ghost, and it's follows this actor kind of like taking on the persona of the Grey Ghost and like becoming a superhero like Batman, and like him and Batman teaming up. And again, it's a really, really just fun episode.
It's on my list, so I'll explain more. I'll talk about it more. But it's, again, one of my favorite episodes, obviously, since it's on my list. Again, not going to reveal which number yet, but I, again, agree with all your sentiments. I'm just holding my tongue.
So, number 4 on my list is a 2-part episode called Robin's Reckoning. And basically in this episode, Batman and Robin are investigating some crime, and they find out somebody connected to this might actually be the person who murdered Robin's parents. And the whole episode is essentially an origin story for Dick Grayson, Robin, in this series, and this is a really, really good freaking episode. Like, I rewatched it right before you came over, and like, just the writing in this episode and like the character development, it's so well done. It's on your list, isn't it?
Holy copycat, Canto 1408, you stole my pick. You stole one of my picks. I'll reveal in my segment.
So, number 3 on my list is It's Never Too Late, which is about this mobster whose son is missing, and he's also involved in a gang war with Rubric Thorne, who's another major mobster in Gotham City, and is actually a minor villain throughout a lot of other episodes of the show. But a lot of the episode is really about this mobster kind of realizing his past mistakes a little bit, and realizing that he's effectively destroyed his own son's life, and it's really about him kind of finding some redemption. And what I really appreciate about this episode is, like, you have a lot of episodes of this series that deal with, like, the underground crime in Gotham City and, like, mobsters and stuff like that, and they're typically portrayed as two-dimensional bad guys, but here this character is portrayed very three-dimensionally in this episode.
What's amazing about this show is that it really dives deep into, like, the crime gangs and all that, and really sets all the crime lord war going on within Gotham City. Like, they establish those families and really do a good job of going deep into that, and the fact that they do it in like 30 minutes when compared to like some of the movies and even Gotham, which is the entire show sometimes, or an entire season, this show sets those storylines up really well and does it better than any of the other incarnations, in my opinion. It's also on my list, so I kind of have to hold my tongue there. But yeah.
So number 2 on my list is Baby Doll. This episode, it's about an actress who has some kind of condition where basically she stopped growing at a certain age and has the body of a little girl, essentially, yet she's a full-grown woman. She's basically a woman trapped in a child's body, and essentially she just went insane after a show she was in was canceled, and she was never able to find work, and it's about her going after the people she starred on the show with, and Batman has to stop her. But this is a honestly really heartbreaking
sad episode.
Because, like, you actually do feel really bad for this woman. And I'm wondering if maybe this episode was partly inspired. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. But
No, I haven't seen that one.
There's some similar ideas in that. It's not about a woman who's like only 3 feet tall, but it's about a former child star who's gone crazy in her adult years. I have a feeling this episode might have been inspired by that movie. This is a fantastic episode.
Yeah.
And the ending will honestly make you cry.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking. It's that, again, it's one of those go-to episodes. For me, I would want to give a shout out to the voice actress that plays Baby Doll, because I think it really the episode really showcases not just the actress's range playing Baby Doll and the whole thing, but the fact that like she bounces between like for the majority of the episode she's playing like this kitty type of character, you know, this child character, and then at the end when the shit hits the fan. And just like the couple lines that she says in her like adult, you could hear like the adult voice come through as the change, because the subject matter that the episode talks about is like it basically focuses on an actress. Trying to recapture like a former glory of sorts, or try to re-experience, because it was like the actress Baby Doll. Really enjoy, like that was like her peak. It's basically an actor or an actress trying to recapture their peak in a sense, and showing the not really ramifications, but it kind of talks about like mental health in a sense, in that kind of that, because you know it's like going back to the nostalgia, trying to recapture like a former glory again, and like the final episode, you that imagery of her, you see what she is, but in the mirror she sees who she really is, and the whole thing, and just like the downfall of someone that kind of is past their prime in a sense, and especially in an actor's case where it's like you try to like replicate a character that was successful before and it may not amount to the same way again. It just tackles all those different storylines and ideas, just like personal stuff, and looking back on it now, it's one of those just like it really hits hard when you really see like all the different concepts that this episode hits, and especially how relatable it is to, I think, a lot of people and a lot of actors and actresses nowadays.
Because the episode could also be looked at as sort of a commentary on what the studio system does. I would say the child actors especially, but to actors in general.
Yes. It tackles all that stuff, man.
This is more of a side rant because it's going into the new Batman adventures, but I did not like the other Baby Doll episode they did. This character worked as a good standalone villain.
Yes, 100%. Yes, 100%. I don't understand the logic of pairing Baby Doll with Killer Croc of all things, and think that would work.
And my number one favorite episode of Batman the Animated Series is Two-Face, the episode that it doesn't introduce Harvey Dent because he was introduced earlier on in the series, but this is the episode where he becomes Two-Face. I've said it many times before throughout my Batman reviews. Two-Face is my personal favorite Batman villain, and this episode, it's a two-parter. It's really freaking good.
Very tragic, of course.
Yeah, this really establishes why Two-Face is such a tragic character. And I remember seeing this as a little kid, and even as a little kid, being struck by how sad this character is. But what do you think of this episode?
For me, as a kid, I missed like all the extra stuff that plays into it, but seeing it now, as an adult now, the duality that they play up, and just seeing just the downfall of Harvey in the two-parter. Pretty much like the two-parter episodes in this show are you can arguably put in a top 10 alone. Like just every two-parter, you're in for a good show. And just seeing the downfall of Harvey, especially that he was like an established character beforehand. Yeah. And not knowing, like when I remember like looking back, like when I first watched it and the whole thing, like all the stuff that he's kind of dealing with like the split personality and all that kind of stuff, that wasn't established beforehand. Harvey shows up once in a while in like a cameo type of setting, but he's trying to become the district attorney and the whole thing, heading towards potentially mayor and the whole thing. And then when this episode hits, you're like, oh boy,
Yeah.
he's been dealing with a lot of, you know, and he I believe he was engaged in the episode too.
Yeah. Now, my only issue, and it's a nitpick, really, but like, it deals with a lot of issues of mental illness. Like Harvey Dent obviously is dealing with split personality disorder, which I know now is called dissociative personality disorder, and like probably bipolar disorder as well.
Yeah.
But it does kind of water down those issues because it is a show for kids. And that's just a minor nitpick. I'm a fan of tragic villains. I'm a fan of sympathetic villains.
Same.
And again, Two-Face is like probably Batman's most tragic villain, I think.
Yeah.
Because he's also sort of a symbol of lost hope, because when he was Harvey Dent, he was doing so much good for Gotham City, and he represented, he was a symbol of hope for Gotham City, and so when this happened...
He could be the White Knight.
Yeah.
And Batman could be the Dark Knight. And they kind of complement each other really well, because Batman can do stuff that Harvey Dent can't, but Harvey Dent can do stuff that Batman can't. And it was a good complement duality relationship. And the fall of Harvey Dent is always terrible.
Alright, you son of a bitch from hell. Are you ready to do your list?
Hold on, give me a minute. Yeah, I'm ready. So...
Wrong!
Yeah, coming from you. My number. So here's my list. I wrote it on a piece of paper. I did not have it off screen or anything. But for my number 10, I went with the season 1, episode 13, POV, which is an episode where Harvey Bullock, Montoya, and a rookie cop are basically getting scolded by their superior. Because they had this set up job to capture one of the big crime bosses or something along those lines, and the job got fried. The job got botched, and pretty much Harvey Bullock is lying, and you pretty much hear the story of what happened from Harvey Bullock's perspective, Montoya's perspective, and the rookie. And they're basically trying to figure out who's lying, and...
It's the same story, but told differently by each character. It's very... You could tell they're copying... I don't know if you ever saw the Akira Kurosawa film Rashomon.
No.
But that's basically has the same plot as this. So, like, you've seen this done a lot, where it's like characters telling stories from different perspectives.
Yes.
And that all kind of dates back to Rashomon. Rashomon is considered to be, like, the first story to really do that whole setup.
But yes, pretty much that's the scenario, and ultimately it's an interesting story because, again, I just love when Batman the animated series starts their episodes with like a mystery setup.
Yeah,
and this is one of the best episode setups where the episode basically starts off with the whole scenario sort of, and you get bits and pieces of it, and you fill it in as you go, but you hear like Bullock's perspective, and he's like, I say Batman at the end, and the whole thing, and you just know he didn't. You know?
That is hilarious.
Yeah. So, and it's a really great, again, going back to just my love of when the animated series props up the side characters. Montoya takes front and center. Commissioner Gordon's on the side, Bullock's on the side, this rookie's on the side. It's basically a Montoya story. And it puts her in the limelight, and she pretty much is, you know, the straight-laced cop. She tells it how it is and the whole thing, and the superior eventually takes away their badges and the whole thing. They suspend them because they couldn't find the answer that they were looking for. And Montoya eventually basically just not giving into the call of duty, but just not ignoring the call of duty, even though she's suspended. And with the help of Batman, she ultimately solves the case and gets all the money back, stops the guy and everything. But again, I really love it because of, again, the music, the setup for it, because I think it's a great setup where it's just like, because again, going back to like Harvey Dent being like an established character where even before he's a villain, he's sort of like sprinkled in where he's like, he's there, he's totally there. Montoya is another one of those characters that's kind of like sprinkled in here and there. You see her subtly at times, but this is an episode that puts her in the limelight, and she delivers. And the music's great, the animation's great, and like I said, it has one of the the best setups for like a lot of the stories in my list focus on like the mystery setup and solving what happens at the end. And yeah, that's pretty much my number 10. Totally check out POV if you haven't checked it out already. So my number 9 is Season 2, Episode 8, Riddler's Reform. And I particularly love this episode. It will be one of those episodes where Cartoon Network played one too many times during its reruns and everything. But I remember this episode a lot. What I love about this episode, again, it kind of starts off with an interesting mystery to start off the episode. And it starts off with Batman and Robin supposedly stopping a bus that the Riddler is causing. But it turns out that he's apparently gone straight. Pretty much a rich business tycoon guy hired him for ideas for his Wisecrack Toys company, and he brought the Riddler on to basically come up with toy ideas and the whole thing. And so it comes across like the Riddler is gone straight and trying to do it legit. But there's just something just tickles Batman's funny bone of like, I'm not buying this one bit. Batman and Robin are just not buying this straight-laced thing.
Because they just don't want to give him a chance.
Well, it's not that they're not giving him a chance. It's just they know the Riddler, and they just know that's not how the Riddler rolls. It's interesting though this episode because it kind of focuses on Riddler's perspective on things a bit too, because there's a couple great moments in this episode where it seems like the Riddler's gotten the jump on Batman in a sense, and it does come across that the Riddler has gone straight, but still Batman's not buying in the whole thing. And there's a specific moment where Batman's like, "I'm not buying it, Enigma, and I will get you. You can't I think the line is specifically like, "You can't help yourself." The Riddler is like so self-obsessed and all that, competitive to a fault. And it kind of plays into like mental disorder a little bit too, because he's just so obsessive over this, where it's like Batman's is his one and only challenge, and even the Riddler acknowledges this. And there's a moment after Batman leaves the Riddler, and he's just like, he's talking to his mooks, and he's just like, he's right, you know. That's how the scene starts. It's just him, just like hunched over, just like depressed and all. He's just like, he's right. I just love the Riddler in general in the animated series. I think the episodes that he shows up, it really one of the best interpretations of the Riddler, even comparing him to the live action stuff. I kind of feel like live action Riddlers, even though I have a special place in my heart for Batman Forever, the animated series does Riddler justice really, really well. In every episode, the Riddler leaves an impact, and even in the video games. And this is just one of those episodes. And again, when it really focuses on, it kind of makes the Riddler relatable in a sense. Not really in the tragic sense of like, you know, Two-Face or Mr. Freeze, but Riddler has a lot going on, and when they focus on that stuff, like with his obsession and that competitiveness and, you know, just that obsession with Batman, it's just gold. My number 8 is on this side and is Batgirl Returns, Season 2, Episode 13. It's the return of Batgirl. Pretty much Barbara Gordon has, to my understanding in the continuity of the show, Batgirl and Robin kind of have their own thing going on. They're going to school and all that kind of stuff. And Batgirl, for whatever reason, just decides, like, I'm going to take a break from my college studies, or high school study. I think it was college studies.
College, yeah.
And basically decides to look into this mystery, this crime that happened. She was investigating it, and it just so happens that Catwoman shows up. It's pretty much an episode focusing on Robin, Batgirl, and Catwoman, specifically Batgirl and Catwoman. The reason why I like the episode so much is that the chemistry between Batgirl and Catwoman specifically is really on point. I really like their interactions. And I thought it was an interesting episode with these two characters interacting with one another. The main story kind of focuses on, like, it doesn't go too deep into it, but what I like about it is that it's kind of like tempting Batgirl to kind of maybe go into line of crime, sort of. during the episode, you know Batgirl's not going to cross that line. She pretty much has the same morals as Batman and the whole thing. But I liked kind of especially with her kind of being still new to it, and Catwoman, Selena Kyle, kind of tempting her to be like, hey, we could be partners in crime, and not even Batman could stop us in the whole thing. But overall, though, it ends on a good little interaction with Catwoman, Dick Grayson, and Batgirl. And it's a good episode, and I kind of wanted to give it a little bit of a shout out for it in this list, you know. We're up to 7 now. Number 7 is Season 2, Episode 4, The Trial. And it's the episode where it's a really interesting episode because there's the whole argument. So one of the main arguments when it comes to Batman in general is that Batman created the villains in a sense, and maybe if Batman didn't exist, maybe the Joker, maybe Two-Face, maybe Batman's Rogues Gallery would not exist, or Batman's existence has made their existence worse, and all that whole debate. This episode basically takes that conversation and puts it into the forefront. And what's interesting about it is that you basically have all the perspectives. So what happens is that there's a lawyer that basically has the perspective of what the naysayers say, which is if Batman didn't exist, the Joker wouldn't exist, and all these Rogue Gallery characters wouldn't exist, and the Rogues Gallery kidnaps Batman and the lawyer. Pretty much, Batman gets put on trial, and everything is stacked up against him. Where you have the lawyer representing him as the defendant, who hates his guts and basically wants to put him away in Arkham Asylum with the Rogues Gallery, and Two-Face, Harvey Dent, is the prosecutor, and the jury is like Killer Croc, Harley Quinn, Mad Hatter.
I think the Riddler was on the jury.
The Riddler was on the jury too, and I think the ventriloquist too, and the whole thing. And so it plays out in a trial in Arkham Asylum where Batman's on trial. But the turn of events is that the lawyer actually, recounting all the cases of the main villains and everything, actually ends up siding with Batman ultimately. And it turns out that it's not Batman who created his Rogues Gallery, it's the other way around. It's the Rogues Gallery existing created Batman. And that scenario is just awesome. And it's a great episode because you get a whole lot of great moments within a lot of the Rogues Gallery all at once. So if you have like a favorite villain, they're most likely in this episode. Yeah. And it's just awesome seeing the Joker in a judge costume pulling Elmer Fudd, concealing the trial, and breaking order with a rubber chicken, and so on. There's a lot of great gags in it. I don't want to reveal too much, but that's really like why the episode is so great and so memorable.
Yeah. Now the episode is actually very loosely based on a Grant Morrison comic called Batman Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, which was a comic from the late 80s, and it's an amazing comic. It's basically a horror story about the inmates taking over the asylum, and they'll only give up the hostages if Batman turns himself over to them. You can tell this episode's definitely taken off of that comic. But this is obviously a lot more watered down compared to that comic. And that comic also is what inspired the video game Batman Arkham Asylum.
Yep, great game, by the way. That would be in this list if that was part of it. Pretty much echo what he said. I love this episode. That's why it's my number 7.
Yeah, it's a very good one. I do recommend this episode, too.
So my episode 6 on my top 10 is Season 2, Episode 7, It's Never Too Late. You talked about that one. I love this episode too. I echo the same sentiments as you. Again, this is another episode where a side character kind of gets thrown into the forefront. And I actually kind of like that it almost starts like a whole gang war. And it turns out that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And it was Rupert Thorne and Strongwell between those two families. And Batman finds his Strongwell's old friend Frank, who lost a leg back then.
Actually, I don't think that's an old friend. Wasn't he like his
little brother? His little brother. Yeah. It was his little brother. But yeah, he basically saves Strongwell because they get caught in a train track, and his little brother saves him, but he lost a leg because of it. Just
It's a very heart-wrenching episode too.
Yeah.
Like, it's very emotional and very mature. Again, that's something I love about this show is it was a show for kids, but they
tackled those kind of subject matter.
And they didn't treat the kids like dummies. They like Bruce Timm and the other writers on this show respected their audience, even though they knew their audience was mainly children. They
pushed it closer to mature while still being kids, but the subject matter at times, like this one, you got two crime bosses basically going at it, and then the twist in the episode is that Strongwell thought that his son got kidnapped by Rupert Thorne, and like I said, it almost starts this whole crime war between the two families. But it turns out the guy is overdosing on some drugs that his father sold. Because I take it as like an interpretation of like sometimes like not really like the sins of the father fall onto the son per se, but it's like having like a strong family background in your life, the environment that you grow up in, it sometimes leads you down the wrong path, and it could screw you over in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's important that you recognize, if you're in a situation like that, you have to recognize you're in that situation, you have to get yourself out of it. And it may come at the consequence of like losing a family member, not saying like in death, but like, if that person's toxic and it's messing with like your mental health or like your well-being, like I think that episode kind of tackles that kind of stuff, and sort of agree that he gets redeemed at the end of the episode. I think he does turn a new leaf ultimately. This episode kind of tackles that kind of stuff, and I think that's why I kind of wanted to put it in the limelight as well. I didn't know you were going to put it on your list, and I'm kind of glad you did.
It's an underrated episode, honestly.
It really is.
Yeah. and some really good drama. That's another great thing about this show is, like, really good, solid, like, drama on the show, too.
Yep. That's my number 6.
Or 5.
I'm getting to it. Season 1, episode 41. If you're so smart, why aren't you rich? It's I believe, the first episode that introduces the Riddler. And long story short, he was pretty much just like he was kind of, I guess, like a video game designer, sort of.
Yeah.
And this company gets rich from the video game, and the owner of the company basically fires Enigma. Yeah,
and then they take credit for the game, and
take credit for the game, and
causes him to go crazy and become the Riddler.
Him being the creator, he should get some dues from making this company millions, and they basically fire him, where he does all the work, and then they just fire him and be like, we take the bones that you created. Kind of, to be fair, he's kind of justified for going a little crazy here, but ultimately he goes too far with it. And he basically kidnaps his former boss, attempts to murder him, the whole thing, and Batman and Robin get stuck in the middle of it trying to save the Mr. Mockridge, who is the boss tycoon. It's just one of my favorite episodes, one for video games. It's just a fun episode. The traps that Riddler comes up with is really cool, where he puts some modifications into a live-action version of his game, and Batman and Robin have to find a way to the center of the game because no one's ever done it before. And they kind of cheat to do in the whole thing. It's a fun episode. And part of the reason why this episode is on my list is how the episode ends. Because ultimately, Batman and Robin save Mockridge, unfortunately. The Riddler gets away. It seems like Mockridge might have gotten out scot-free, but it's kind of a double-edged sword, because it's implied the fact that the Riddler wasn't captured and still out there. And Bruce Wayne even says, like, because it ends with Robin and Batman talking about how Mockridge got a $10 million basically buyout of the company, because after he fired Enigma, the company started going down, and Bruce Wayne came in to basically bail out the company and bought it. But Mockridge got like a sweet $10 million out of the deal. And so he's living large. He's set for life. But the fact that the Riddler's still out there, it doesn't matter. The episode ends on a great line where it's like, how much is worth is a great night's sleep, or something along those lines. Basically implying like, you have all the money in the world, but Mockridge may never have a night where he could sleep soundly and feel safe. For me, like that image of Mockridge just like curled up in under his blanket halfway in, sleeping with a shotgun underneath his bed or right next to his bed. That imagery has always stuck with me, and that's why it's on this list, because it's a fun episode. A lot of great like quips and all from the Riddler, but that final image and that like contradiction of like this guy got out scot-free but not really. So number 4. Season 1, Episode 32, Beware the Grey Ghost, the one that you talked about before, too.
It's a fantastic episode, man.
Yep. Again, I reiterate, rest in peace, Adam West. I hope you and Kevin Conroy fight in crime in heaven.
They weren't Batman in real life, right? They were just actors?
Anyway. No. Yes, I'm aware, but... yeah, it's the episode where you basically got the old school Batman that like probably like was the Batman of our parents, with the Batman that we grew up with. This one I had to put on because of the whole Adam West, Kevin Conroy Batman connection. It just goes without saying. And for me, it's kind of cool though too, where it's like Batman meeting his personal hero. And especially for me, since I met Kevin Conroy, who was my hero. And, I know some people may say, like, it's corny that Batman has, like, a shrine for the Grey Ghost in his Batcave, but I appreciate it.
I like the fact that in this episode, Batman's basically a fanboy.
Yeah, and it shows levity. And it's for Batman being such a serious character, I think it's actually good that he has, like, a nerd side to him a little bit. Because it also plays into, like, his dad and the whole thing, because he used to watch the show with his dad. And for me, I had those same experiences. I don't want to go into that too deeply, but basically, my dad isn't around anymore, and I have a lot of experiences with that where I watched like Batman, not even just Batman movies, but like Die Hard, Star Trek, and stuff like that with my dad. And so it kind of plays into that as well. And so it made it more relatable in my sense.
Yeah.
So it was hard for me to keep this episode off my list personally.
Oh, yeah.
And even now, like it goes even beyond just like nostalgia for both Batmans, but it's also now just sentimental reasons at this point now. Not just like the Batman stuff and the sentimental reasons and all that. It's also a great episode. It's a decent mystery. Yeah. And going back to, it kind of relates to Baby Doll a bit too.
Oh yeah, I was about to bring that up actually.
Because it's Adam West's character is basically he's an actor that's past his prime, and and he even has a moment in the episode where he's like, "Well, old friend, you paid the rent the last time." And the Grey Ghost is like this big deal in Gotham City and everything, but yet the actor that played him was basically had to sell his last bit of his he had to sell his costume, some of the props that he got from the show, sell his last bit of stuff in order to cover the rent.
Yeah.
Which is especially nowadays with people in our generation, dealing with apartments and paying the rent monthly and the whole thing. Again, actor past his prime, and there's even a moment in the episode during the whole explosions and everything where the guy's like calling up his agent and being like, "Is there any work? Can you please get me any work?"
Also, I don't want to give away who the villain of this episode is when you find out the bomber is.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like when you find out who it is, it's kind of a weird commentary on toxic fans.
Yes. 100%, where they take the material way too seriously.
Yeah.
Very low key, but yes. No, I agree 100%. Just that subject matter, and this episode is one of the go-tos for a multitude of reasons. And for me, like I said, it's definitely has some personal personal connections now as well, sentimental reasons as well. It's one of those go-tos that you just have to watch if you watch this show. So my number 3 episode is Shadow of the Bat, the origin story of Batgirl, and I love this episode as well. It goes back to the main really good mystery setup, going back to that theme, I guess, if we want to talk about it. It's a really well put together mystery, I think. Because it starts out with Commissioner Gordon getting arrested, and Batman is investigating it on the side. And it's a cool episode where Batman's actually out of his costume most of the time. I love those moments when Bruce Wayne actually goes out, puts on like a fake costume, plays like a criminal like Matches Malone, and comes up with these ridiculous names to just blend in with the criminals and just trying to find intel and stuff. But it's mainly a Robin and Batgirl episode mainly, and it's actually an interesting twist where I guess I'm going to spoil it, but the DA is basically in league with Two-Face. Basically, Two-Face is trying to implement a gopher so he can have some say in the goings-on politically within the city. There's a lot of great moments in part 2 where Batgirl kind of earns her stripes. She saves Robin a bunch of times, even though she kind of screws the pooch a little bit at times as well.
Well, she's new, you know.
Right, rookie and all. Mm-hmm. But a lot of good moments. It's a fun. It goes back to being fun though too. Mm-hmm. And it's just cool seeing Barbara Gordon kind of go through that journey of becoming Batgirl. They do a really good way, and it's a really enjoyable, really fun episode, and a really great mystery too. Highly recommend it. Check it out if you haven't seen it. And what did you think of the episode? It's on your list, so you already talked about it. So fuck you. Mm-hmm. My number 2 is Perchance to Dream, and this one's one of my favorites. This is one of the go-tos I think the majority of top 10 Batman lists, and it's just a phenomenal episode. Starts off with a phenomenal mystery, probably the best like mystery start ever, where Batman essentially gets captured and wakes up in a world, in a Gotham City, where his parents are alive, someone else is Batman, and he's engaged to Selena Kyle. Pretty much everything is handed to him on a silver platter. Everything that he's ever wanted. He's not Batman. He has his parents. He doesn't have daddy issues. Well, he does have daddy issues still. But yeah, that's the scenario. So you're just like, WTF? Like, what? Like, if you don't know what's going on, it's just like, what? Right from the opening title, the title card for Perchance to Dream, they basically imply like what's going on with the main villain and everything, because they kind of subtly play his theme, and I just love little Easter eggs like that hidden throughout the animated series, and yeah, like the whole setup, again, one of the best mysteries, probably the best mystery setup that Batman has to unravel, and the way he unravels it. Not even like intentionally unraveling it, like, because like what's interesting about it is like I actually had this conversation with somebody before, with one of my friends, where it's like if you're put into like an artificial reality, and it pretty much you could do whatever you want, eat whatever you want, the whole thing, like the Matrix, and you could do whatever you want, say whatever you want, do whatever you want. Would you do it? Would you just accept it as it is?
No, I wouldn't.
Would you accept it as it is, or would you want to come out of that fictional reality? And I'm on the same boat. I wouldn't want it either.
Because if I knew that was all fake, then no, because all the people I'm talking to aren't even fucking real.
Well, that's the thing, where it's like if you don't realize that it's fake, would you do it? And I would still say like. I understand your caveat is if I never found out, but even if I didn't find it, if I ever found out, I would want out of it right away, because it's fake.
But what's good about this episode also is like some of the best episodes of not just the animated series but the movies as well, like Mask of the Phantasm especially, are the ones that explore Bruce Wayne and Batman as a character.
Yes. Yep.
Like explore his psyche and like I've always been a fan of the ones where it's really about Bruce more so than Batman himself.
Yep. And like what's interesting about this episode is that there's a moment in this episode that Bruce Wayne actually accepts it. He's like, this is it. Yeah. He's just like, I'm the happiest I've ever been, Alfred's here. I got my folks. I've always wanted that. I'm marrying Selena Kyle, and she's not Catwoman, and the whole thing. Like, I have everything I've always wanted, and he actually accepts it. But then he tries to read the newspaper, and the harsh reality sets in, and it's just like it's fake, and there's just something clawing him inside that I just can't accept this, and for me, like, I totally respect that, because like I said, I'm on the same boat, and it's just like, yeah, it's great to have like everything you've always wanted at your fingertips, but sometimes it's not always the best either, and it feels dirty when it's a lie like that.
Yeah.
When it's just a projection, a perchance of sorts. How he finds out is really interesting. It's like it has a scientific logic to it too, which is awesome. Very realistic. It's just a really interesting storyline. One of the go-tos, one of the GOATs episodes, I'd say.
So what is your number one, my child?
So my number one is Season 1, Episode 51 and 52. It's a two-parter, Robin's Reckoning, as I mentioned before, but it's my number one. And this episode it's the episode that I find myself constantly, every time I put on Batman the Animated Series, I constantly go back to this episode. To me, it's just the perfect episode. Just like, it doesn't necessarily have like a mystery or anything in like some of the other episodes, but just like the storytelling. Robin's story of how he becomes Robin, not just like the dramatics and everything, but it's just so heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. And it really hits like, and it goes back to like another sentimental episode to me too, in relation to kind of my personal life and all that as well, especially now. But just like the music, the imagery, just from the opening title card, is just iconic to me. Just like a lot of like show don't tell moments where Dick Grayson is like, he's kind of in a good situation where he gets adopted by Bruce Wayne, and yet one of the right before the episode ends of part one, it cuts to Dick Grayson in his in the house, in his room that Bruce puts him in. It's just the house being just so big with this shining light above it, and the camera just kind of zooms out, but you just see Dick all by himself, just weaving the situation because he's lost his parents and everything. But it's good, and that's kind of like the contradiction of like he's in a good situation because he's got Bruce Wayne, he's got a good money and stuff like that. Like he's in a good place, but at the same time he's not. And for me, again, with my personal matters as well, I kind of felt the same way as Dick Grayson felt at that moment too. Obviously his room is bigger than mine, but like that scene, that particular scene has always stuck with me. And even the following scenes afterwards where Dick Grayson kind of goes independent, trying to find the guy, the Tony Zuko, who basically ruined his life because he murdered his parents pretty much. He sabotaged the Flying Graysons act, and they fell to their death and everything. And it also shows like a darker side of Batman too, where he literally says in one moment that like Tony Zuko has my undivided attention. Batman wants to get this guy for what he did to Dick Grayson and the whole thing.
Yeah.
And Dick Grayson on his end kind of going down the same path as Batman was, doing his own investigating, venturing into areas where Gotham's not the safest and the whole thing, and just following that journey and everything. And ultimately it comes to a climax at the end where Batman almost gets killed by Zuko, but Robin comes in at the end and the whole thing. And it just ends on a really good note because Batman kind of admits that he's worried that... He basically admits that he was worried that Robin was going down like a similar path that he was at that time. And he was afraid that Robin wouldn't be the same, you know? Because Robin, as soon as Robin finds out that it's Tony Zuko, he goes on a vengeful path as Robin, and Batman tried his best to kind of keep him out of that and the whole thing. And that kind of what leads to one of the later episodes too in the season 2. But point is though, There's just so many great moments. There's even a reference to Akira with the motorcycle and all that, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Shout out to that. But this episode really, really hits me on not just like the storytelling and just just everything else, but just the sentimental implications too for myself. And like I said, it's every time I put the animated series on, that's always been like my go-to episode. It's just like I have to watch Robin's Reckoning. That episode kind of pulls me out of the darkness sometimes, and that's why it's my number one.
This episode sucks.
It's on your list too!
I know, I'm just fucking around.
Now, before I end this video, I want to cut to my friend John giving his list of his top 10 favorite episodes of Batman the Animated Series. Also, even though Eric and I specifically left off episodes of the new Batman Adventures, John does include episodes of that on his list.
Hello everyone. Christian asked me to do my own top 10 personal favorite Batman the Animated Series episodes. Before I delve into that, I just want to go on saying that Batman the Animated Series is one of my favorite TV shows of all time, and in my opinion is probably the best Batman ever. It was very true to the Batman comic books and mythology, and the voice acting and talents were so great and perfect that anytime I read the comic books as a little kid and to this day, those voices are the first thing that come to mind. For a 90s kids TV show, it was very adult-oriented. This is just my own personal opinion, what I think are my favorite episodes of Batman the Animated Series. Number 10 on my top 10 personal favorite Batman the Animated Series is Judgment Day. This is one of the last episodes of the New Adventures of Batman and the Animated Series. A man dresses as a judge goes around killing Batman's enemies thinking they're better off dead. As a little kid watching this, it shocked me at the end who the judge was behind that mask. I'm not even going to reveal it. My recommendation is go watch it and you're going to be very surprised on who the judge was in the episode. Number 9 on my top 10 favorite Batman the Animated Series is Trial. This is an episode that questions on whether or not is Batman responsible for creating the villains. This is like a pre-Arkham Asylum to the video games in a way. I love it how the Joker is the judge and a lawyer who hates Batman defends him in a way that whether or not Batman is responsible and guilty for these crimes. Number 8 of my top 10 favorite Batman the Animated Series is Mad Love. In this episode, I love it how we finally saw Harley Quinn's background, that she was a psychiatrist before she was a criminal with the Joker. And also how we see how the Joker does not love and how he's manipulated Harley throughout the years. It shows a bad example of unhealthy relationships. When the Joker pushed her out the window, I was like shocked and it was very intense. It also made me feel very sorry and sad for Harley for what she's gone through with the Joker. Number 7 of my top 10 favorite Batman the Animated Series is Beware the Great Ghost. Despite not being a fan of Adam West's Batman, it's cool seeing the two Batmans, past and present. Adam West passing the torch to Kevin Conroy being the Batman of the 90s. It's also cool to see how Batman is a bit of a fanboy of the Great Ghost. I also like how that they both team up together because an episode of the Great Ghost comes to life. Number 6 of my top 10 favorite Batman the Animated Series is Heart of Ice. This was way much better than what they did in Batman and Robin. What they should have done is watch this episode and take notes. This is probably one of the best episodes showing how tragic and sad Mr. Freeze is. We also see how Mr. Freeze is misunderstood. The dialogue of Mr. Freeze is written well. One of my favorite lines in the series, Mr. Freeze telling Batman wishing he could be normal and feel the sun in a hot sunny day. Think of it, Batman, to never again walk on a summer day with a hot wind in your face and a warm hand to hold. Oh yes, I'd kill for that. Number 5 of my top 10 favorite Batman the Animated Series is Two-Face, Part 1 and 2. This episode did justice to the Two-Face character instead of Batman Forever. Before Harvey Dent was Two-Face, Harvey was friends with Bruce Wayne and he was a likable character. After Harvey Dent's accident, he becomes Two-Face. Batman feels guilt for not saving Harvey Dent. The dream sequence he has is tragic, and when he sees his parents, they ask, "Why didn't you save us, son?" As if Bruce feels responsible for not saving his parents when they were murdered. Number 4 on my top 10 favorite Batman the Animated Series list is Christmas with the Joker and Holiday Nights. It's my tradition that I watch these every Christmas. The first Christmas episode is basically straightforward. It was my intro to It's a Wonderful Life before I saw the movie. When I was a little kid, my grandmother gave me this episode on a VHS copy with the Joker on the cover. Holiday Nights is based on a comic book from like the Batman Adventure comic books, and it was an anthology episode with 3 different stories. The only difference is they left out Mr. Freeze's story. It's very fun, entertaining, and has some funny humor moments. Number 3 on my top 10 favorite Batman the Animated Series list is Nothing to Fear. This episode to me is underrated. No one talks about or gives it much praise or credit that much. It was the first appearance of the Scarecrow. I love how we see Batman's fear of failing his father, thinking he's shaming his father's work, business, and legacy. It's something we all fear, failing our parents, which is something I can relate to in this episode. I love the final confrontation when Batman uses the Scarecrow's gas on him and fears Batman. When the Scarecrow sees Batman as a demon, it resembles that character from Fantasia. I love the final scene when Bruce is at his parents' grave. He puts roses, walks away, and we see the shadows of Batman, showing how, Batman will never forget his promise to his parents that he'll always fight crime no matter what. Number 2 on my top 10 favorite Batman the Animated Series list is Perchance to Dream. It's a great what if Bruce Wayne was not Batman, his parents were not killed, he's about to marry Selina Kyle, and he works for his father's company. Bruce thinks he has the perfect life until he looks at the paper and realizes it's all a dream. When he battles with Batman, it's great, and a twist on who was behind it. It's a great, also analogy about, how there's no such thing as the perfect life, and that we all have, obstacles to overcome in order to live our lives. Number 1 on my top 10 favorite Batman the Animated Series list is Dreams of Darkness. This was the first episode I ever saw Batman the Animated Series as a kid, on a VHS tape with Batman on the cover. This episode plot of Scarecrow was inspired for Batman Begins. That was my top 10 favorite list of Batman the Animated Series. Hope you enjoyed them, and thank you, Christian, for asking me to be a part of this video.
So yeah, that was our top 10 list of our top 10 favorite episodes of Batman the Animated Series. Again, it's an episode that's very near to both of us, near and dear to both of us. I also think it was this show, like you said before, for a lot of people, this Batman is the definitive Batman.
Yeah.
I also think if it wasn't for this show, we would not have nearly as many Batman fans now as we do, because... Batman has really surpassed even Superman as, the most popular DC superhero, and one of the most popular superheroes in general.
Of all time, yeah. Everything that Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, Alan Burnett, Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill, the whole cast and crew, it really was a somehow lightning in a bottle dream team of, some of the best animators, some of the best storytellers in that industry just coming together and really making something incredible. I remember in a behind-the-scenes video of Conroy talking about when they did a sit-down of the opening credits to the animated series, and just listening to the opening intro to it and everything, and he's just like, "We're working on that." That was his reaction, literally. He just the opening credits with the music and everything, and it's like, I'm working on this. I'm Batman in this. What? And just because the show didn't really go with a traditional approach to animating a show. Right down to the very score. They used a professional movie top of the line budget score, developing the music and everything, the animation. It was even more expensive because they were doing it on dark paper. I mean, it just wasn't a traditional show, but what they accomplished with everything, and obviously the amount of spin-offs and everything, the animated series has spawned so much. It's everything to me that Bruce Timm has created, and everything that Conroy and anyone associated with that crew. A lot of their stuff, I think, is just timeless stuff. Yeah. It's, like I said, it was just a lightning in a bottle of the best people coming together at the right time. And damn, thank you guys. For me, thank you guys for making this awesome, awesome show. And the movies and everything. I mean, I'm sure you hear it every day, but it's really left an impact on so many people. And it's a travesty that the Oscars didn't acknowledge Kevin Conroy. All that aside, again, thank you guys. And I hope you enjoyed this top 10 list of our favorite episodes of Batman the Animated Series.
See you at a later time, my friends.
On the same Bat channel?
Same Bat time. Or however that goes.